What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and I just want to give an especially warm welcome back to all of the OG subscribers, Basement Mafia members, basement dwellers, whatever you want to call them. The guys that have been supporting this channel since last redraft season in the summer of 2021, the Dynasty season before that, the redraft season, summer of 2020 when we had 0 subscribers. Everyone that has been around the channel for a while now, when I say Crazy Ambassador, that means something to them. And to those of you guys out there that are new, Crazy Ambassador was a video series that I started up at 600 subscribers last April. It is still to this day one of my favorite videos and video series I've ever done on the channel. And the whole idea was to join a Dynasty League on Reddit and try and win the whole thing before they figure out that I'm documenting the entire process on YouTube. We are now in year 2. Do not worry, I have a Crazy Ambassador update coming at the end of the month where I go over the team, the trades I've made since the last update video, and what our strategy and overall mindset is heading into the rookie draft. But in Dynasty and in Fantasy, my strategy and just overall gameplay or style has been changing. It has been a year since that last video. I'm a much different Dynasty player at this point, and because Crazy Ambassador is past the startup and I can't break down that startup for you guys again, we're going to do probably going to do a similar video to this every single offseason where I go over a startup draft that I've joined and kind of go over my trades, my strategy, all that good stuff. And this startup was perfect for that because it's with familiar faces in the Fantasy Stock Exchange boys. So Danny, Bush, you have Notorious Fantasy is in there if you guys know him. Some other guys that are sort of around the space in terms of showing up on videos and just being mods and Discords and YouTube channels, all that cool stuff. So kind of some familiar faces in there. And I kept a nice little log in my notes of what my thoughts were on the clock, trades I made, back and forths and DMs, a lot of really, really good stuff. So we're going to break down this Dynasty draft from the ground up and talk about everything that was on my mind in terms of preparation, strategy, all that good stuff, because I think the only way to really give you guys actionable content surrounding Dynasty startup drafts is to show you one in practice. So with that being said, if you enjoyed this video at all, you find anything useful from it, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm pretty cool. My nitty bag.
I can't stress this enough, fellas. If you are joining a startup league, make sure you read the rules. Do not be the guy where it's the 4th, 5th round and you're like, why are kickers going off the board? And you figure out that the rookie picks halfway in, you don't know what's tight end premium. If you're spending money on a league, be on top of your shit. For this league, we got the league overview here on the screen. The name of it is the Too Lazy to Set Lineups League. It's 12-person, super flex, no tight end premium. By the way, I did vote for tight end premium. It didn't pass, whatever. PPR, 4-point per passing TD, 27 roster spots. I think there's like 3 taxi, 3 IR, quarterback, 2 running back, 3 wide receiver, a tight end, 3 flex, a super flex, 16 bench. It's a best ball league. It's 3rd round reversal. There's some big play bonuses for 40-yard or more plays or whatever. And the last thing is that rookie picks are kickers. So the first kicker off the board is the 101. The second kicker is the 102. All the way down to the 48th pick. There's only 4 rounds in the rookie drafts. 4 times 12 is 48. Is the 412. Now, before we even break down the first pick, I want to let you guys know kind of what my strategy is going into this league. And the biggest thing here is that this is a best ball league, which in my opinion, there's a big edge to be had in best ball right now in Dynasty, because a lot of these Dynasty sickos, they know players and trade markets and all that. They really don't understand best ball structure yet. And for those of us out there that are rocking with Underdog, you guys see the apparel. Use promo code RON when you deposit on Underdog Fantasy. You will get your deposit matched all the way up to $100 when you use promo code RON at the deposit. But for these Dynasty leagues, ideally most of them should be best ball. In season on Sundays, I really don't love setting 20 lineups. I had last year about like 6. I think I had like 6 Dynasty leagues and maybe 12 redraft. It's a lot to do every Sunday morning. Ideally, you're very active in Dynasty and making trades in the offseason, but in season, you can just kind of have everything tend to itself and be best ball. As of right now, 2 out of my 8 Dynasty leagues are best ball. I hope that moving forward, most of my Dynasty leagues are best ball. Ideally, it'd be about a 50-50 split. Now, the biggest edge in best ball, again, is that people don't realize that structure is so important in best ball leagues. So in a Dynasty best ball, when everyone's really focused on trading and accumulate rookie picks, they don't realize that at the core of winning the championship, the biggest advantage is just understanding how best ball structure works. And in a format like this, with 3 wide receivers and 3 flex, You want to have as much wide receiver firepower as possible. You want to absolutely bully the flex spot with massive boom weeks from your wide receivers, and you want to have a bunch of wide receivers that can go off at any given time. And the reason for that is that wide receivers have spike weeks where they can go off for 20, 30 plus points, give you crazy weeks. And the other thing is that wide receiver scoring can pretty easily match running back scoring in PPR. The biggest thing is that wide receiver scoring is way harder to replicate off waivers or bottom of the bench guys. We saw this last year. I bring this up to the point where I sound like a broken record. Michael Thomas, he goes down. Marquez Callaway does not just come in there and give you wide receiver 2 numbers right off the bat. He was still irrelevant for fantasy. But if we look at the Chicago Bears backfield, David Montgomery goes down. Khalil Herbert, a day 3 rookie, comes in. A running back we aren't even sure is good. He comes in there and right off the bat averages 15 points per game. Now, 15 points per game doesn't sound like a whole ton, but last year, the RB12 in points per game was Josh Jacobs, who averaged 15.1 points per game. You are replicating your opponent's high-end RB2 production from bottom of the barrel handcuffs at the bottom of your bench. You can't do the same thing for wide receivers. So having a bunch of stacked wide receivers is a bigger advantage than having a bunch of RB2s. The biggest thing that you can fade, or the biggest point of advice that I can give you in a dynasty best ball, is fade those high-end RB2s. You do not want to spend significant roster value on Josh Jacobs, David Montgomery, Elijah Mitchell, all of those guys like that either are, if they don't have a pathway to be a top 5 running back, I don't want them. The play is to probably anchor your running back spot with either a hero running back or just go full 0 RB and just have 10 plus running backs in that RB 30 to RB 60 range that are literally lottery tickets. Your Alexander Madisons, Melvin Gordons, even guys that are fun like JD McKissick and Nyheim Hines, where especially in a best ball where they can give you those PPR points where they pop off for like 15 points one week, those go a long way in replicating RB2 production against your opponents. So without going into a full 0 RB rant here, my strategy is to prioritize difference makers across every position, stack up quality wide receivers, and fade RB2s. Simple as that. To start the draft, we have what's called a derby, which means the derby order is randomized and the person at the top gets to pick their draft slot. So say you pick the 101, you get the 101, the 212, the 312, remember it's third round reversal, 401, and so on. And your boy was a bit lucky, so I got the first pick, and I chose to go with the 112. And I kind of love the turn in third round reversal because at that spot, you can go at the 112, 201. You can go 2 of like Kyle Pitts, Trey Lance, Deshaun Watson. And then on the way back at the 301, you can scoop up whatever fell from the second round. And the last thing we'll go over before we get into the first pick is before the draft even starts, I like to send out a message to every person in the league that I haven't DM'd previously, because on Sleeper, they make you accept a request to chat the first time you talk to somebody. The worst thing ever is when you're wheeling and dealing and you're trying to move up into the 5th to grab rookie picks and do A, B, C, and D, and you can't get a move done because a guy doesn't have his message request accepted from you to him through DMs. So you want to get that out of the way right off the bat. And I just send out like a dumb message like, hey man, just send in DMs to open up the message request or whatever on Sleeper. And just a nice message reaching out that you just say, hey, what's up, man? Just a good way, dapping them up, having some rapport with your buddies in the league. And it's just that. I used to say, I'm looking to trade. I like to trade up, trade down, always open to offers or whatever. And that's okay to say, but I think it's a little bit needy at this point. I think most experienced people playing Dynasty Leagues are pretty much aware that everybody's trying to trade at all times. So now the draft order is set. It's round 1, and it's a pretty standard start. We have Josh Allen go, Mahomes goes, Justin Herbert goes, Lamar Jackson goes through 4 picks. And at this point, in my head, I'm pretty much content on sitting on my hands and just snagging 2 of Deshaun Watson, Kyle Pitts, Trey Lance. And yes, even in non-tight end premium, I'm down for Kyle Pitts at the 112, 201. He is a unicorn. Super young, super productive. He is still a difference maker, even in non-tight end premium. Then we have the 105 and 106, which go Kyle Pitts, which Kyle Pitts at 105 in a non-tight end premium is pretty crazy, but I'm not going to say that I like the pick, but to each their own. Then we have Jamar Chase. And the biggest thing here is I have Kyler Murray at my 105. Now, it doesn't seem like a big gap, but if you can get Kyler Murray, your 105 at the price of the 107, that's a pretty big gap. If I can buy him at 107 prices, I'd be down to scoop him and pair him with one of Deshaun Watson and Trey Lance. And at this point, I can't guarantee I can get both of Deshaun Watson and Trey Lance at the turn because I know a lot of people in this league like Trey Lance. Deshaun Watson at this point was traded to the Browns, so he could have gone literally at the 107. So I decided to hit up the 107 and see, what's cracking. And Here's the thing that I'm going to say about trading in startups is that it's really tough. It's kind of like the wild, wild west in terms of trade value, because you only do a few 5, 10 startup drafts in your entire fantasy football career or whatever. You can't replicate it. Every single Dynasty league, every single Dynasty startup is its own ecosystem where everybody values things different. One person in another league might say the 3rd and 4th startup pick is enough for a first round startup pick, where someone else might say, no, that's not enough. I can't move around out of the first for a 3 and a 4. It's all over the map. So on top of my own tuition and kind of feeling out values, I do like to pair that with trade calculators and just kind of see the stock value of what the 105 really is. And I use 3 trade calculators. All of them have their own flaws that you can use depending on the situation. And the first one is the Dynasty Dominator app. I use that for the Crazy Ambassador series. It's by the guys over at Player Profiler. Great site. It's where I first started writing articles. And their only problem is that they overvalue quarterbacks. They have Jalen Hurts at 110. They have Aaron Rodgers at 210. They are a little bit too quarterback heavy, so I don't really like to use their trade calculators for startups where I use their players. But if it's just a trade between startup picks and rookie picks, that's my number one go-to. I also don't mind Dynasty Trade Calculator. I think that's a fine trade calculator in terms of startup picks, but they treat rookie picks like throw-ins, like bags of Cheetos. Like, you can trade a rookie first for Alan Lazard on Dynasty Trade Calculator. You can't actually, I'm just joking, but that's kind of what it feels like. If it's just startup picks, Dynasty Trade Calculator, absolutely fine. And then at the last one we have is Keep Trade Cut, which is really annoying to calculate, but it's pretty solid, where if, let's say, you have the 101 and you are thinking about trading away the 101 for the 212 and the 301, you got to find the first ranked player, put him into the trade calculator, find the 24th and 25th ranked player, 212 and 301, and put those players into the other side of the trade calculator, which is annoying because it gets tricky where they have rookie picks included. So the 25th overall player might actually be the 303 instead of the 301. It just gets all over the place. It's annoying, but sometimes it is worth it. Now, I hit up the 107 and I tell him, I'm down to give you my 412, 501, 24 first for your 107 and 807. And there's 2 reasons behind this. I like the idea of, if I'm going to trade up, I'm going to be pretty aggressive. And I also will say, side note, if you're going to trade up into the first round, I am always down with trading up. I know most people say you should be trading back. And I do agree with that for the most part. But we operate in a new era of Dynasty where everyone's trying to trade back. So it's hard to trade back. And on top of that, you can trade up at discount. And if you're trading up into the first round to take a quarterback in a super flex league, I don't think you can really ever go wrong with that, especially because if you're trading up and you keep one of your first round picks and you can stack 2 elite quarterbacks together, I think you're probably better for it. So trading up here isn't a big deal to me, and I don't mind taking the 24 first. That's why I offered it, because I think by the 2024 season, I'll accumulate enough profit and trade back enough times to replenish that draft capital by the 2024 draft. And then on top of that, I'm sending my 412 and 501 for his 107 and 807. That's 2 players for 2 players. Ideally, when I'm trading, especially this early and in a best ball league, I'm not trying to forfeit any depth. That's why I want it to be 2 players for 2 players, not instead of 107 and 807, maybe just for his 107, I could have done a 4 and a 6. But I really want it in a spot where I get 2 players back for my 2 players. Now, this is what the trade looks like in the Dynasty Dominator app. And the deal is favoring my side by about a late second is what 60 points is. And I think that's about right. If you're sending that first offer, that anchor offer, you want to be winning by a little bit, or just send out an offer that isn't your absolute lowest that you'd sell whatever you're selling for, because you don't want to establish that as the anchor point. You want to sort of have a little bit of leeway, and then if he counters something back, you can kind of find something in the middle ground. And he said that he wasn't really going for trying to trade out of the first round. He wanted to, if he traded back from the 107, he wanted either my 112 or 201, which is completely reasonable. So he counters with his 107 and 906 for my 501 and 112. And that's honestly not a bad offer, but I really wanted to keep the 112 so I had a better shot at securing one of Deshaun Watson and Trey Lance. Because I make that move, I trade up to 107, I forfeit the 112, and I pick up the 201. And if he took Deshaun Watson or Trey Lance at the 112 and neither of them were available at the 201, I would be down horrendous. Now, I asked him what needs to happen to change that 112 to a 201, and he had to make his 9 a 10. So I jumped back from his 9 to a 10th to be able to still secure that 112, which is fine. I gave up a little bit more juice, but and the trade calculator still looks okay. I trade away my 201 and 501 for his 107 and 1007. I profit by about 30 points on the trade calculator, but that's literally the same value of a 4th round rookie pick on there, so pretty even. So the big points of doing that trade is that I get to potentially pair Kyler Murray with Deshaun Watson or Trey Lance without losing a player or losing any depth. and that's big. Then we see, after I take Kyler Murray at the 107, we see Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, Jonathan Taylor, and Javonte Williams go. So now I'm sitting here at the 112, and it's kind of bittersweet. Trey Lance and Deshaun Watson made it back to us. Could have just double tapped them right now and stayed put, but I don't have the 201 anymore. So at the time, I kind of regretted moving up. It becomes a dichotomy of, would you rather have Deshaun Watson, Trey Lance, and the 501 startup pick, or Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, and the 1007 startup pick? I think I lean Watson and Lance side, but it's pretty close because with Kyler Murray and Deshaun Watson, you're getting two legit top 5 quarterbacks in terms of seasonal, and the wins above replacement opportunity at quarterback in terms of the advantage you're getting in season on a weekly matchup basis. It's the same kind of advantage you'd get from starting something like JT and McCaffrey at your running back spot. So you're getting a very big advantage by having 2 elite quarterbacks like that. So I can live with it. So we end up snagging Deshaun Watson here at 112, who's my 106. I fielded offers for a second, but something that I've learned, especially with this startup draft, is let's say you're at the 205 and your 107 and your rankings is still on the board. Very rarely are you going to get a trade offer that's going to come close to what you need to be comfortable moving off of that pick, right? If you have a player in a tier of his own, you should probably just make that pick. Nobody is going to pay 107 prices for your 205. Everyone wants to pay the sticker price on your pick. So if you have somebody that you value way ahead of your pick, just take it. So now the third round reversal happens. We are up at the 301, and I run to the podium, go straight to the make selection. I didn't even field any offers. I have Christian McCaffrey at my 202. He is the last player available inside of my first 3 tiers of startup drafts that are pretty much, I think, like my top 18 players. And with Christian McCaffrey, getting him at the 301, that's just massive, especially in best ball where you can just anchor McCaffrey in as your RB1 and just throw darts on RB2s for the rest of the draft. It's a very big advantage. Now, I also just want to say, you'll see a screenshot from Keep Trade Cut on the side of my rankings as well. I don't just take best player available on my ranks. I make picks with the market in mind. If you have a guy who's your 301 and you're picking at 301, but the market's 201 is on the board, I'll just take the market's 201 because he's clearly a tier ahead of where you have him, or where you have your guy in the market's eye. And if you get that 201, you can just trade him later. You don't hold on to these players for life. I don't love Jalen Waddle, but I took him at value in a startup draft earlier on in the offseason, and you just flip them later. You take these guys at value that you know you'll be able to trade, because if you take a guy, let's say you take a guy like Jalen Waddle at the 312, you know you'll be able to trade him away for something way juicier than the 312. You could maybe trade him away for something more in that early third, that 2-3 turn area in terms of just trade value alone. So most of the time I'm siding with the market. So with Christian McCaffrey, as you guys can see, Keep Trade Cut ranks the 101, which is Breece Hall, DK Metcalf, and Christian McCaffrey all in like the same area. They're all kind of within the same tier on Keep Trade Cut. So with that being said, I just took CMC. And ideally, when you make these picks, you are taking players that are in the Venn diagram where you have market value and you have your own personal ranks where the market value tier and your highest tier, they overlap, and the players that are in that both section of the Venn diagram, that's the player you take, and that's what it was with Christian McCaffrey. So now we are at the 412, and I want to backpedal a little bit and talk some strategy as we get to the other turn. And here I thought about trading up for Fields. He fell all the way to the 401. I have him as a mid-second in startups, but after giving up a 5th, I wasn't really trying to trade up anymore. I was also, I already had 2 quarterbacks. Just wasn't really a move. He fell all the way to the 401, and I would have liked to go up and go grab Fields, but again, I already traded up for Kyler. I already gave up my 5th round pick. I already had 2 quarterbacks on the roster, so didn't really need to force that. And I also wanted to say that I used to say that I just wanted best player available and I didn't care about positions in startup, but I think that's a little bit naive. And we'll talk about why best player available in terms of running backs isn't the best idea in the world in a second, but with quarterback, it's kind of self-explanatory. I mean, hoarding quarterbacks isn't an awful strategy because you can just like hoard 4 or 5 quarterbacks and you can just store a ton of value. The thing is that people are going to realize that if you want to compete, you need to move those quarterbacks off of your roster, so they kind of get some leverage there. Maybe you might have to trade away some of those quarterbacks for less than sticker price, which is kind of an issue. And the biggest problem with that is that in a league like this, where you can start 6 wide receivers, you can hoard wide receivers and it's not a big deal. Quarterbacks, you can only start 2 of them on a weekly basis. Now, it is best ball, so you can get the 2 best quarterbacks on your team to get in your lineup, but you're still going to have 20-point weeks just sitting on your bench, which isn't great. If I have 2 first-round premium quarterbacks like Deshaun and Kyler, I'm not looking to get another top 12 quarterback. Will I take guys like Matt Ryan and even Tannehills of the world and Kirk Cousins of the world? Fine, but there's no reason to stack Justin Fields on top of Kyler and Deshaun. In my opinion, I think it'd be tough to win a championship that way. Now, again, if you do that and Justin Fields is falling, you can trade him away, but I don't think that if you have 2 quarterbacks already, there's any reason to trade up for a quarterback is all I'm saying. But if I was on the clock and I had 2 really strong quarterbacks, Fields is there and he's a massive value, then I'll take him and I'll make a trade to kind of offset things later. You'll also see DK Metcalf fell to like the 308, Diggs fell to the 408. Those are 2 guys that I had my eye on as pretty good value. And again, just didn't feel like it was worth to move up just because I was thin at that 412 and 501. I just didn't really have a lot of ammo to go move up again after moving up to the 107 because I kind of just stayed put at that time. And now this screenshot kind of just shows what I was staring at in terms of the available players. And this is a screenshot from Adiko's ADP. He is a really great follow on Twitter. I believe he's Adiko_FF. I could be wrong though. He's in Bean Counter, Drew Oceanuk, Bulletproof Bean Counters, Discord. One of the most egregiously underfollowed Twitter accounts. He does really, really good work. And when I say I'm a black belt in Google Sheets, he is an airbender in the Google Sheets. He is absolutely wild. And he compiles ADP for free. It's literally a shareable Google document. I think it's probably in Drew's Discord, or he might give it out for free. I really don't know. But regardless, I'm going to put every resource that I have in this video down below in the comments. So if I do find the free version of it, I'll give it to you guys. And he compiles ADP from real sleeper drafts. He uses like an API that scrapes real sleeper startup drafts, and he compiles ADP, which is huge, especially when we talked about earlier where we're trying to kind of see where the market is leaning with our picks. I know it says Kenneth Walker there, but it's supposed to say 106. These are ADP with rookies where I had to delete the rookie, put in a rookie pick, so I forgot to make him the 106. Pretend that Kenneth Walker on the screenshot is 106. Now, I want to talk about running back for a second here. I wasn't debating running back here at the 412 because we have so many available. We have Mixon, Dalvin Cook, Kamara, Saquon, all on the board. Derrick Henry, I don't know if I mentioned him. You have Saquon as well. That had me really tempted at 412. You guys know I love Saquon, but there's just a few issues with grabbing Saquon. And the problem is that the format, like we said earlier, it dares you to neglect a running back, especially if you take him at Christian McCaffrey, where you can just kind of spray and pray for your RB2. In a best ball with 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and 3 flex spots, and you can start only 2 running backs and 6 wide receivers every week, if you so please. After going CMC, again, I'm just trying to grab the Kareem Hunts, Alexander Madison's, Chase Edmonds of the world and just fill that RB2 spot on the fly. And there's such a large tier here where there's like 6 running backs I could think about taking here. If I really, really wanted to get one of those running backs at a discount, I could wait for half of them to go and then think about trading up. I have all of those guys in a similar tier. I do have Saquon ahead, but again, the market doesn't have him in that same tier. And on top of that, I already have McCaffrey. And another reason I didn't want to go running back here at the 412 is I have 2 quarterbacks and a running back through 3 rounds. And you guys know a point of emphasis for me was really building out my wide receiver position. And we have no wide receivers through 4 rounds, 48 picks. So that brought me to a couple of options. We had McLaurin, we had Godwin, Devonta Smith, and the 105, all at the 412. And I decided to go the 105. That's why I locked in here because it locks me in for one of Breece Hall, Malik Willis, Drake London, Treylon Burks, Garrett Wilson. That is my top 5 tier 1 in Dynasty Superflex rookie drafts, and getting that last pick of that tier is huge. I'll just take whoever falls to me, gives me a little bit extra flexibility, liquidity with a 2022 first. So I don't mind that at all. Again, I've been talking about this all offseason. Those top 5 picks are my favorite. Or they're not all the same tier. I would say 101 to 102 with Breece Hall and Malik Willis. That is tier 1. And then tier 2 is Burks, London, Garrett Wilson, whatever order you want to put them in. Now, according to Adiko, the 105 is actually the 508 in startup ADP, and I took that at the 412, so it was a slight reach. I really wasn't thrilled with what made it back to me again. Just not a ton of value. Devonta Smith, McLaurin, those guys just don't feel great at the 501. To me, those guys are more mid to late fifths. There just wasn't, nothing really fell to me there. So I will say, in a little bit of hindsight, I wasn't super bummed anymore that I traded away my 5th to go up to get Kyler Murray, because if I had to take 2 picks there, and let's say it was like Devonta Smith in the 105 instead of I guess it would be Devonta Smith in the 105 or the 105, and I'm talking on my ass. We can't even make that dichotomy, but you guys get what I'm saying. It's not as bad because there wasn't anybody sick on the board, which then brings us to the next turn, the 612 and the 701, and this is what Adiko's ADP sheet looks like after I updated it. And as you guys can see, Aaron Rodgers is an absolute screaming value. So is Derrick Henry, but you guys know I'm not really trying to take running backs at this point. We are on the board at 612, and he is not only Adiko's screaming value, he is on Adiko's ADP, he is the 407. Again, he lost Devontae Adams, but this was I think a week after, so it was pretty much updated on Adeko's ADP. And on top of that, it's not like he's not still Aaron Rodgers. They're probably going to draft a weapon. He should be fine. To me, it's not as big of a knock as falling to the 6-12. I feel like 6-12 in Superflex for Aaron Rodgers is wild. Again, Adeko's 407, my 403, keep trade cuts 409 at the 6-12. So I'm sitting here, and I pretty much come to the conclusion I need to take him. If I trade this pick away, I won't get anything I want in return for it. And if I take him, I could have just taken him, especially with Deshaun Watson set to miss games. But with, this would be 5 picks in, only 1 wide receiver, I wanted to kind of look around and see if I could swap out Kyler for a wide receiver. And the reason I didn't think of doing it with Deshaun is I think until Deshaun Watson sets a foot on a football field, I'm not trying to trade him because you're not going to get market value. Or you're going to get market value, but you're not going to get the value that I value him at, which is the 106. You're not going to get that value until he steps foot on the football field. And once he does, he probably becomes the 103 for me. So I'm holding on to Deshaun Watson for dear life. So while I was on the clock at the 6-12, I poked around to see if anybody wanted Kyler. And the idea here was to move Kyler for a stud wide receiver and a little something on top, and then take Aaron Rodgers at value. So I approached the lad's third Danny, and he had Dak at quarterback, no quarterback 2, and he had a plethora of wide receivers: Justin Jefferson, DK Metcalf, Devonta Smith. And I can't stress this enough. It's very important to find a trade partner that makes sense. And Danny made a lot of sense because he needed a second quarterback and he had a surplus of wide receivers. So a deal there makes sense. And a strategy I love in terms of trading while I'm on the clock in Dynasty startups is sending more than one offer to somebody. And especially in a setup like this where he had Devonta Smith and Metcalf and he had Justin Jefferson, I was cool with either Kyler in a pick for Devonta Smith, Metcalf in a pick, or Kyler Murray in a pick for Justin Jefferson in a pick. So I sent him Kyler in the 212 for Metcalf, Devonta Smith in the 704, and I sent him Kyler in the 212 for Justin Jefferson and the 904. Now, both of these are about even on Dynasty Trade Calculator. Again, I prefer this trade calculator when I'm using actual picks and there's no rookies involved. Again, I don't love Dynasty Dominator app in terms of how they value Kyler and just any players in general. Their startup values and their rookie values on point, though. Danny hits me back. He said he doesn't like Metcalf's side, but he's interested in figuring something out that works for the Kyler Murray and Justin Jefferson swap. Now, if I didn't give him 2 options and I just gave him the Justin Jefferson one, maybe he would have said no way. I don't know. But it is something that I think is good where you can kind of say, here are 2 kind of ideas I like. You pick one. So then I go back and forth in Danny, and we're trying to pretty much figure out the difference in round between Kyler Murray in a pick and Justin Jefferson in a pick. What should that be? He counters with Kyler in an 11 for Justin Jefferson and a 10. The thing is that I wanted to have a 2-round difference. So if it was going to be Kyler in 11, I wanted J. Jeff in a 9. And so what I sent back to try and get something like that is I did Kyler and the 212 and my 701 for his Jefferson, 1004 and 704. So I still jump up 2 rounds, but to give him a little bit of juice, I let him move up from the 704 to the 701 at this turn. Then he sends me one more counter where he changes my 701 to the 612 and my 1004 to the 1009. I let him keep the 1009 locked in, but I told him I couldn't trade the 612 because the whole point of keeping the 612 and just squatting on this pick is to trade away the 701. And so I can take Aaron Rodgers here because I give him the 612 and I kind of trust him or whatever. It's not that Danny's a scumbag. He obviously wouldn't take Aaron Rodgers there if I told him not to or we made some kind of agreement, but still just sketchy stuff. I would just rather sit at the 612, have him pick at the 701 so I can secure Aaron Rodgers. That's the whole point. Secure Aaron Rodgers, trade away another quarterback and lock in that value. If say I traded away Kyler Murray and he takes Aaron Rodgers at the 612 or it's some random in your Dynasty league and he takes Kyler Murray or he takes Aaron Rodgers at the 612, you're screwed. So he makes it the 701. The trade goes through. Also, a side note, this was a spot where I'm at the turn. I'm squatting on the 612. I hate to be that guy, but in a spot like this where you're on the clock at the 612 and it's a scenario where you need to get a deal done like this, you can kind of squat on the clock and kind of try and make something happen for the next few hours where you can sit there and you kind of have some leverage where you can just sit there, let the timer run out a little bit and mess around and try and make some moves. So the final deal on the ledger is Kyler, the 1212 and the 701 for his Justin Jefferson, the 1009 and the 704. So I compromised my initial offer, letting him move that 9 to a late 10 and letting him move 3 spots up in the 7th, but I'm fine with giving up a little bit of juice. It's pretty much even on the trade calculator. The deal's done. I now have Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, Justin Jefferson, Christian McCaffrey, and the 105 through 6 rounds. I'm pretty happy with that. Now, through 6 rounds, here's the draft board at this point. I was hiding the first row for the first 20 minutes because I didn't want you guys to see that I ended up trading away Kyler Murray later. I hope that nobody picked up on that. The next pick is now the 704. And after Aaron Rodgers, for me, there's this clear tier of wide receivers that I want. Again, I really want to stack up difference-making wide receivers, especially in this range that I really like in that 7th, 8th round, where you have Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, Keenan Allen, Mike Evans. I also like Dallas Goedert, but I just meant those difference-making wide receivers that are sort of veterans and unsexy. Those guys can come in for you and give you fringe wide receiver 1 production pretty easily. Now, ideally, of the guys I listed, I hope that I get 2 of those wide receivers in Dallas Goedert. That was the goal. Those guys are, again, difference makers at wide receiver with the upside for wide receiver 1, top 12 type seasons in their range of outcomes. A little bit of a side note is at this point, I have 3 10th round starter picks, which is nice. It gives me a lot of ammo to make some noise in this 7 to 10 round range where I'm trying to scoop up 2 to 3 of those guys in this tier. The problem is that I only have a pick at 704, and then I have to wait all the way for the 812. So I'm keeping my eyes on that tier as those guys go. Mike Evans, Keenan Allen. I'm trying to move up and get those guys from that tier before they get picked before my next pick. So the 701, Danny takes Keenan Allen. The 704 comes around. I take Michael Thomas. In hindsight, I will say I wish I went Mike Evans just because Mike Evans is valued so much higher in the eyes of the market than Michael Thomas. But for me, Michael Thomas is kind of where I broke a little bit of my own rule just because I do believe in him so much and I prefer him in Dynasty to Mike Evans. I just couldn't pass him up. And I do think in this league with Danny and Bush, they're a little bit higher on Michael Thomas than the market is. I know that Danny said in DMs that he was actually thinking about Michael Thomas at the 704 or at the 701, and that's kind of what sparked me taking Michael Thomas. So after the 704, I'm watching Goddard, Mike Evans, DeAndre Hopkins, those 3 guys that are in that tier for me that I'm really hoping I can get 2 of before it's all said and done. Now, Goddard isn't necessarily in that tier in terms of my rankings. You can kind of see he's in that next tier in terms of tier color, but he is, in my opinion, the last difference-making tight end for me. After that, you have Dawson Knox and Dalton Schultz and all those kinds of guys. For me, Dallas Goedert is where it really falls off. Even in a non-tight end premium, I don't mind having a difference-making tight end or just somebody that is a legit tight end 1. So then Mike Evans goes to the 707, which pretty much lights a fire under my ass that I now got to move up and try and secure both of them, which is a really tough task because you have to trade up. You can trade up for 1. It's hard to trade up for 2 picks. And I hit up the 711 because he said that he wants to move back. He's been piling up rookie picks this entire time. And I offer him my 10-12 and 24 first for him, his 711 and 802. I'm trying to get both of his picks so I can wrap them around the turn. And the idea is that I get both of those picks. 711 comes up, I squat there, and then I go from the 802 and try and trade up to the 801. That is, or to the 712, and that's what's going on in my head. But instead of that offer, he counters me back, the 711 and the 802, for just my 23 first, so no 10th round pick. So I make that move. I don't think that's a bad move at all. Again, the only problem is now the 711, I need to try and get from the 802 to the 712 and hope that the guy at the turn will make that move with me. Because say I take DeAndre Hopkins and he takes Goddard at the turn, now I'm stuck there at the 802 with a tier of players that is plentiful and not the guys that I wanted. I'm screwed. So I squatted the 711 and that's a weird sentence to say, but I'm squatting at the 711 and I'm asking the guy at the turn, what would I need to do to get his 802 or to give my 802 for his 712? I was down to add some juice to it, get a rookie third, maybe move him up a couple rounds later on in the draft, and he really wasn't interested. He was just trying to sit there at the turn and do his thing. But the weird part is that we had like a back and forth conversation, and I was like, I have 2 guys here, I really want to secure both. And then he kind of told me who he wanted, and pretty much ended up telling me that he wanted Goddard, Mooney, or David Montgomery. And I told him Goddard was one of my guys, so I took Goddard, came back around, he didn't take Hopkins, I took Hopkins, we secured it. And as you guys can see, I put the trade in the trade calculator with my Goddard and Hopkins for a 2023 mid-first rounder. Not bad. We win by about a late second. I think that was pretty good value, especially for, kind of what I'm trying to build on this team where we get a tight end, we get a wide receiver, and kind of forfeiting a little bit of high-end starters after trading up for Kyler Murray. All right, now we're at rounds 8 to 10. And this is at a draft where we don't have to get in depth about every single trade and every single move that I'm trying to pull off here, but this is where all of my trading ended up in terms of having a surplus of 3 10th round picks. And after taking DeAndre Hopkins, I felt like there was a clear tier break and was more than happy waiting all the way to the 812. Hated the board once the 812 got to me as well, so I traded my 812, 901, 1812 for the 906, 1204, 1306. And the main players on my board that I was trying to target in that pretty much that 9-10 turn was Tom Brady, Brandon Cooks, Kadarius Toney, A-Rob, and Tyler Lockett. And the move for me is I wanted to take Tom Brady and get 3 of those wide receivers with my 4 picks around that turn, or 4 picks around that turn. I don't know why I held up 5. And none of them were going, so I was content with just kind of trading back. So I trade back from the 906 and just try and get positions so I can take as many of those players as I can in the 10th. Then I saw Matt Ryan go. And then I knew at 11th, Bush was there, who's a Bucs fan, and he ended up taking Fournette there. So I needed to jump ahead of him to secure Tom Brady, because I really wanted Tom Brady, who is he's perfect in best ball, where he is going to put up a ton of points and he's going to cover Deshaun Watson while he's suspended or whatever to start the season. And once Deshaun Watson comes back, Tom Brady is a cheap enough top 12 quarterback where I actually like him coming off the bench. And when Kyler Murray or when Deshaun Watson or Aaron Rodgers have down weeks, Tom Brady can come in there and have a fine week. So he is a really nice quarterback where he's cheap enough, but also gives you real difference-making production in Superflex. So I trade up for Brady. We still have our 4 wide receivers on the board that we're targeting here at this point. And the hope is that we see one of them go and we can trade up if we need to. But if not, hopefully they make it back to our 10th rounders. The problem is the beginning of the 10th was a nightmare. Cooks was trying to trade up, couldn't make it happen. Then you had Allen Robinson go, you had Kadarius Toney go. So I got stuck with taking Tyler Lockett in the beginning of the 10th. And then I had to take the 205 and the 206 instead of stacking up those wide receivers I really wanted, which sucked. And it just kind of goes to show that when you're trying to maneuver around the draft startup board, you can't always get what you want in terms of I want to have X amount of players from each tier. It does just kind of, it is kind of just the way the cookie crumbles, if you will. So we take 205, 206. This gives me a little bit more liquidity. I can always trade away those seconds, try and get into future draft classes. And on top of that, could always use those picks. They're in that range. I could get Sky Moore, maybe Isaiah Spiller falls that far if he goes like 3rd round in the NFL draft, Desmond Ridder, Wan'Dale Robinson. There's a lot of players in that 205, 206 range that aren't awful for 10th round startup picks. So now that we're in the double-digit rounds, we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty. We're just going to look at the rest of the board here. And I'll talk about some values and just kind of overall structure and strategy here. I love the values that I got with Rondale, Tyler Boyd, and Jacoby Myers, which was around, I think, like the 11th, 12th round, 13th round. And these are guys that are going to give me usable weeks in PPR best ball that are really cheap. And it pained me in that, I think, 11th, 10th round where I had to take Ezekiel Elliott at the 11:03. He fell all the way to the 11:03. And I was on the clock and I was thinking, should I take Zeke or should I take Pollard? And you guys know me. I love Tony Pollard. I'm not the head of the Tony Pollard cult that is Jacob Sanderson, but I'm up there. And I just couldn't pull the trigger on Zeke just because, right? And I just couldn't pull the trigger on Pollard. I had to take Zeke there just because Zeke is so much more valuable in terms of just trade market, and he's probably more likely to score more points just because he has that contract locked in. So given really the whole argument is that it's Pollard at cost over Zeke and not just straight up. So I did take Zeke. I have them back to back in the Dynasty rankings. I have Zeke literally one step ahead. So I took him 11:03. I love that. Then I also scooped up Melvin Gordon at the 13:06. Melvin Gordon was the RB21 in points per game last year. Ezekiel Elliott was the RB15. We took 2 running backs that were top 24 guys last year, got them outside of the top 10 rounds to pair with Christian McCaffrey, which is amazing. I love what they give me in terms of scoring points in my RB2 spot in the near term. Then I also love that I got Albert O at pick 15. He's my tight end 11 in my ranks. I probably would have taken him as early as like the 12th or 11th pick. I honestly only let him fall so far because I have him on more than half of my teams and just kind of wanted to diversify my portfolio a little bit. But again, got stuck with Albert O. I always do, and it's paid off nicely. Then we double tap Goff and Jimmy Garoppolo, which was really fun at the turn. Those are 2 players I was shocked to see there. They go a lot earlier than they did there, and they're 2 players that I think are going to probably start 5, 6, 7, maybe more games than that in 2022. So that's going to be pretty good points in the Superflex and the quarterback. If anybody gets hurt, Deshaun Watson's down, I could use those kinds of weeks. So they're going to help out the team a lot. Then the rest of the way, we just take scrubs. But as you can see, I take 11 running backs in my last 22 picks. In these late rounds, I have no interest in those roster-clogging wide receivers like Jalen Reagor, James Washington, Devin Duvernay, Auden Tate. All of those guys I will easily pass on. Give me Sony Michel, Jarrett Patterson, Dearness Johnson, all of those kinds of guys. Devonta Smith goes down. Jalen Reagor doesn't do anything better or worse than he did the week before. He doesn't just become a must-play wide receiver 2, but when Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers go down or whatever, Sony Michel becomes a top 12 play. Jarrett Patterson, if Antonio Gibson goes down, becomes a fringe RB2. Same thing with Dearness Johnson with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Same thing with Deonta Foreman with Christian McCaffrey ahead of him, and so on and so forth. I scoop up all of these guys, and they are going to be lottery tickets on my team where they're going to come in due to the fragility of the position. As their starters go down, my team is going to get stronger as everybody else's RB2s get weaker, and the season goes on, I can match their production and get a leg up on them much easier. Now, this on your screen is going to be the final team. I'm really happy with the final squad. I think it's competitive enough to contend in 2022 and be, make the playoffs, make some noise in the playoffs, while having enough youth and draft picks to not completely crumble if things don't go my way. And again, I know I keep talking about it, but I love the way running back is set up here. We have McCaffrey as our anchor running back that can give us 20 points per game, and then we also can get whatever usable weeks we can squeeze out of Zeke, Melvin Gordon, Michelle, Jarrett Patterson, all of those guys. If their starter goes down, we are looking really good. Now, I think a really good way to gauge how strong your team is for 2022 is using Underdog. And I went on there, I found the ADP for each of these players that made the starting lineup, and I ranked them by ADP. So you can see Aaron Rodgers is QB10, McCaffrey's RB2, and the team looks really nice. We have 2 top 12 quarterbacks, the RB2, the wide receiver 3, the wide receiver 12, the wide receiver 23. It's a really strong squad, and that's without even factoring in Deshaun Watson or the rookie picks we're going to make later. Now, again, Underdog is a really good spot to be able to gauge how strong your teams are, or, just the near-term outlook of a lot of these players. I think we get really zoomed out and far away from what players are going to do in the near term for us, so you can kind of get reeled back in and zoom back in with Underdog. They also have Superflex tournaments for all of you sickos out there, so when you hop on Underdog, use promo code RON. When you go on there, if you deposit $10 when you use promo code RON, they will match 10. If you do 100, they'll match 100, all the way up to 100 as the max. Now, on this team, you'll see we're a little bit weaker at flex. We have the wide receiver 37 on Underdog, wide receiver 48, wide receiver 52 in our last flex spot. Ideally, we're a little bit stronger there. And the plan is to add some wide receivers to the rookie draft at the 105. That should be one of Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks. Maybe even the second, we get Sky Moore, anything like that. Or maybe we even trade away those picks and kind of maneuver our way to the 23rd. We add some wide receivers, and maybe we even maneuver our way from those seconds and maybe trade them away for veteran wide receivers, something along those lines. And then also maybe in the rookie draft, we maneuver a way that we can kind of trade back and scoop up some more rookie, equity in that 2023 class that we now don't have a first or second in. Now, in terms of the overall startup, I would say I'm generally happy with this team. I think that it's solid. I think in the end, I probably could have held off on trading up for Kyler, but I think it worked out in the end with the 4-5 turn not being great and us getting Aaron Rodgers later. But I'd say probably the worst part is just that one spot from 8th to 10th round where I couldn't secure another of Kadarius Toney, Allen Robinson, and Brandon Cooks. But it happens. You're not going to get every single player you want at the top of your tier and be able to make those moves to make that happen. Again, this is a real startup. Can't have a flawless startup. It's almost impossible. Now, on here, we used a plethora of resources, ADP and trade calculators and all that. That's all going to be down below in the comments. I'll pin it, all the resources I used. Also, the rankings I used are on my Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. You go there, and I have my top 250, my Superflex rankings, my quarterback, wide receiver, running back rankings, tight end rankings, my rookie rankings, all that good stuff that you can use to dominate your rookie drafts and startup drafts this offseason. Make sure you check that out. It's $5 down below, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. And as always, if you made it this far and you enjoyed any part of this video, you found any part of it helpful, make sure you get down below, subscribe, and leave a like. And as always, I will see you guys in the next one.
Channel Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper, song, singer, suspended, subpoena for misdemeanors. Dreamer, held back asses, Loki's